The American frontier ran on handshakes. No contracts, no courts that mattered. If a man gave you his word, that was the deal. And if he broke it, there was no appeals process. There was just what happened next. The gunfight at the OK Corral? 30 seconds of shooting that people have been arguing about for 140 years. But nobody talks about what actually caused it. 5 broken promises, exposed one at a time like cracks in a dam, until the whole thing gave way. In 1877, a prospector named Ed Schieffelin was wandering the hills east of the San Pedro River in Apache country. 29 years old, 13 years of nothing to show for it. His clothes were held together with patches of deerskin and rabbit fur. He had 30 cents in his pocket. Soldiers at nearby Camp Huachuca told him the only stone he'd find out there would be his tombstone. He filed his claim on September 3, 1877, named it after the insult. The first vein was a dud, 3 feet deep, and it pinched out. Nobody in Tucson would stake him. So Ed walked 180 miles north to find his brother Albert, who he hadn't seen in 4 years. At the McCracken mine, he met an assayer named Richard Gerd. Gerd ran his best sample, $2,000 a ton. The silver was real. And here is where the story actually starts. Because these 3 men formed a partnership that night on nothing but a handshake. Never put it on paper. Not a single word written down. They left camp after dark so nobody could follow, set up in an abandoned cabin where 21 people had been murdered over the years, and started digging. Ed struck the lucky cuss, then the tough nut, then the contention. Within 3 years, Ed and Albert sold their shares for over $1 million each. Richard Gerd made his fortune too. Nobody cheated, nobody lawyered up, nobody broke the deal. 3 men, a handshake, millions of dollars. And the thing held. Tombstone was born from a promise that was kept. Every disaster that followed came from promises that weren't. By early 1879, Tombstone was 40 cabins on a windy mesa called Goose Flats. Lots on Allen Street went for $5. 2 years later, the population had blown past 5,000. 110 saloons, 14 gambling halls, stamp mills pounding ore around the clock along the San Pedro River, 8 miles south. $25 million in silver pulled from the ground in the first 4 years, close to $900 million in today's money. It was filthy, loud, and violent. Clara Spaulding Brown, a journalist from San Diego, wrote that the desert wind whipped the loose soil into a gritty fog that stung your eyes and coated everything you owned. George Parsons, who kept a diary, slept on bare ground his first night while rats ran over him. The Tombstone epitaph ran a regular column called Death's Doings, just for the shootings. On December 1, 1879, 3 Earp brothers rolled into Tombstone with their women, James, Virgil, and Wyatt. Virgil carried a federal appointment as Deputy U.S. Marshal. Wyatt carried plans. Wyatt was 31. He'd quit the Dodge City police force because, in his own words, the town was losing its snap. In Tombstone, he filed mining claims, ran faro tables at the Oriental Saloon, and kept his eye on the real prize. On February 1, 1881, Cochise County was carved out of Pima County with Tombstone as its seat, and the new county needed a sheriff. Most people hear sheriff and think law enforcement, but in Cochise County, the sheriff also served as tax collector. He kept a cut of everything he brought in. That office was worth roughly $24,000 a year in 1881 money. You didn't need a silver mine if you had that badge. Wyatt wanted it. A man named Johnny Bean wanted it too. So they struck a deal. Verbal. Wyatt would withdraw his application. Bean, once appointed, would make Wyatt his undersheriff. They shook on it. Wyatt stepped aside. Bean got the job on February 10th. Then, Bean gave the undersheriff position to his political ally, Harry Woods, who also happened to publish the Tombstone Nugget newspaper. Under oath, Bean first denied the deal had ever existed, then admitted he'd lied. One broken word. That's all it took. From that point, Wyatt Earp and Johnny Bean were enemies. And since Behan's office had quietly become the political shelter for a loose network of cattle rustlers and outlaws operating across the border, the Earps now found themselves opposed to both the sheriff and the men he protected. Doc Holliday, Wyatt's closest ally, put it simply. From that time, a coolness grew between them. Coolness. That's a polite word for what was building. The men Behan sheltered were known as the Cowboys, capital C, not regular cowhands, a loose confederation of maybe 200 to 300 men connected through the Clanton and McClory families, held together by shared territory, shared sympathies, and one rule that nobody needed to write down. You don't sell out your own. The patriarch, Newman Old Man Clanton, ran a cattle operation built on theft. The family never registered a brand, didn't need one. They raided ranches in Sonora, drove the stolen herds north, and sold them to butchers in town who didn't ask questions. Everyone knew, nobody stopped it. Old Man Clanton was killed in August 1881 during a retaliatory raid by Mexican forces. He was cooking breakfast when they hit the camp, fell face first into the fire. That left his son Ike in charge. Ike was not his father. He was a talker, a drinker, and by every surviving account, not a man you'd want beside you when things got serious. But he understood one thing clearly enough. The only thing keeping him standing among the Cowboys was the belief that he was one of them. Loyal. Solid. That belief was about to be tested by a secret handshake he should never have made. In March 1881, a stagecoach carrying $26,000 in silver bullion was ambushed outside Tombstone. The driver, Bud Philpott, was shot through the heart. A passenger named Peter Rohrig was killed. Rumors swirled around Doc Holliday. An affidavit was extracted from Doc's companion, Big Nose Kate, while she was drunk and furious. She recanted when she sobered up and said she'd been manipulated by Behan's people. 3 suspects were named: Billy Leonard, Harry Head, Jim Crane. All cowboy connected, all still at large. Wyatt overplayed his hand. Around June 1881, he approached Ike Clanton privately, quietly. He proposed a deal. Ike would lure the 3 suspects into a location where Wyatt could arrest them. Ike would collect the Wells Fargo reward, $3,600. Wyatt would take the public credit and use it to win the sheriff's election against Behan. Another handshake in the dark, cowboy helping lawman, each man getting something he needed. But all 3 suspects died before anything could happen. Leonard and Head were killed during a botched robbery in New Mexico. Crane was shot dead in the Guadalupe Canyon massacre. The plan evaporated, and Ike Clanton was left holding a secret that could bury him. If the Cowboys ever found out that Ike had agreed to hand over 3 of their own to the Earps, it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a funeral. His. Ike became convinced that Wyatt had told Doc Holliday about the arrangement. Whether he actually did is still debated. But it didn't matter. The fear was enough. A paranoid man with a guilty conscience is more dangerous than a brave one with a clean one. October 25th, 1881, the night before the gunfight. Ike Clanton walked into the Alhambra saloon. Doc Holliday found him at the lunch counter and went straight at him, called him out. Morgan Earp, sitting nearby, told Ike that if he wasn't armed, he should come back when he was. Instead of leaving town, Ike sat down to an all-night poker game with Virgil Earp and Johnny Behan. Picture that table. The man who'd secretly agreed to betray the Cowboys, sitting across from the lawman who knew about it, while the sheriff who protected the Cowboys dealt the next hand. Nobody slept. Everyone watched everyone else, and nobody said what they actually meant. By dawn, Ike was sleepless, drunk, humiliated, and walking the streets of Tombstone with a Winchester rifle in clear violation of the town's weapons ordinance. Virgil pistol-whipped him from behind and arrested him, $25 fine. On his way out of the courthouse, Wyatt ran into Tom McClory and cracked him across the face, then hit him again with his pistol. By mid-afternoon, Frank McClory and 19-year-old Billy Clanton had ridden in from Antelope Springs. They found their brothers bruised and furious. Frank refused Sheriff Band's request to disarm, said he'd give up his weapons when the other side did the same. And then, The last promise broke. Bayan walked down Fremont Street to meet the Earps. He told Virgil he would handle the situation. He said he'd disarm the Cowboys. He didn't or couldn't. The result was the same. The Earps and Doc Holliday kept walking. Virgil had collected a short-barreled shotgun from the Wells Fargo office and tucked it under his long coat. He handed it to Doc and took Doc's walking cane in exchange. 4 men, shoulder to shoulder, walking toward a narrow vacant lot on Fremont Street where 5 men stood waiting. Bean stepped in front of them, told them the Cowboys were already disarmed. They weren't. What happened next took 30 seconds. The Tombstone epitaph ran the headline the following morning. 3 men hurled into eternity in the duration of a moment. But it wasn't a moment. It was 4 years of accumulated fractures. A handshake between 3 prospectors built the town. A broken deal between Bean and Wyatt turned allies into enemies. A whispered arrangement between Wyatt and Ike created a terrified man looking for a fight he wasn't equipped to finish. And a sheriff who told both sides he'd sort it out, then didn't, removed the last barrier between argument and gunfire. On the frontier, your word was the only infrastructure that mattered. When it failed, there was nothing underneath.